Well, welcome to another episode of our Culture Club series. My name's Sam. I'm part of the team at Proclaimers. I'm joined here today by Pastor Tom, who's the lead pastor of Proclaimers Church. So good to have you, Tom.
Great to be here.
And we've also got a special guest all the way from Offenburg in Germany, pastor of Passion Church, Felipe. You're going to have to say your last name because I can never pronounce it right.
Schurch.
Brilliant. Beautiful. It's so good to have you with us.
In Australia, they called me Schurch, so.
That's so good. It's so good. But as you may have guessed by the title of this series, we're talking about culture today. And this is part of an ongoing series. We've got a few episodes, so you can go back and listen to all of the episodes we've chatted on culture so far. But today we're going to be talking to Felipe a little bit about culture as well and unpacking it. It's so good. Felipe, you visited us earlier this year in January. Spent a weekend at our church. It's really, really good to have you. Just going to start with this question, really. When you came to visit us, were there any aspects of our culture that kind of stood out to you, that impacted you? Did anything hit you when you came and visited us?
Well, definitely like the warmth of welcoming. I loved how we were welcomed by everybody, like literally everybody. There was not a single volunteer or team member or guy or girl we met in church that wasn't warm towards us and just offered us everything we needed. Very open and very, how do you say, like very, like your team is walking around with open eyes and really looking for the details, So sometimes when you are traveling and speaking in other churches, sometimes you kind of like have to fight for your right. And what I mean with that is just sometimes it's little things like, can I get a water? But everything was sorted out. I mean, literally nothing was missing at all. And that is awesome. That is so cool when you're traveling and you just arrive and you know that everything is sorted out. That is so cool. So that was like the first impression I had.
Let me jump in on this particular point. How did we create that culture? Right from the very beginning, I can still remember 15 years ago, I would say things to our welcome team. Now, we need to work on new people having at least a 5-minute interaction with someone else in a discussion and how to make people feel welcome. For people on the door, we worked out how that hugs were not appropriate, sometimes handshakes were not appropriate, but to be sensitive to how people wanted to be greeted when they walked in the door. One of the comments that you made, which I really appreciate, is eyes opened. You talked about open eyes. One of the things that we've constantly encouraged and challenged each of the members of our team is to stay, like you say, open-eyed and seeing everything that's going on. For us, this is how we've created that culture, and we've had to work really, really hard. Obviously, over the last 15 years, the people who started our welcome team are not the people that are in welcome team now. So there's been a constant communication. There's been a process. And the welcome team briefing itself is a forum. So we have a number of other forums whereby we can work on that. But thank you for that. That was brilliant. Maybe you would like to talk about something else that really stood out to you.
Well, I mean, just to put like even more emphasis on what I just said, and you mentioned how you created that. It's the little things that makes a big difference. For example, I remember where somebody of your great team gave me a coffee, and so I was sipping my coffee, chatting, and then the coffee cup was empty, and I was starting to look like, where do I put the empty coffee cup? But somebody already noticed that I'm kind of looking what to do with this empty, coffee mug. So they just took it from me and took care of it. Sometimes people, that's so amazing because it's those little details, especially when you're like, as a pastor, you're around there and people want to chat with you, and just to be able to keep on your conversation without needing to think about, the cup. That was awesome. Yeah, so that, and the good thing was that like everywhere I went with you guys, like from the car, Sam picked us up to the bed and breakfast where we arrived, or in church, or wherever we were, always, it was like that. It was always like that. And so we arrived at the bed and breakfast. Everything was sorted out. There were some gift bags and with some snacks, and we had like a ton of chocolate that I had to bring back to Germany for my kids. So, um, and this is amazing. So I really love that part of your church. The second thing that we really were amazed by your church was the intensity and the attention you put into little details for the Sunday service. So I remember walking in on Sunday morning, and the rehearsal was going on, and I remember Sam leading this part of the rehearsal, and they were just rehearsing how to start the service. And I remember like the pre-roll, the countdown was going, and then the band jumped in and they stopped again, and Sam said, oh no, you have to jump in like half a second later, and you have to come around there and you go this way. And I thought like, whoa, I didn't even know you can think so much about just how to start the first second of the service. And they did it about 3 or 4 times until it was perfect. And this is just so amazing. I absolutely loved it. And yeah.
Let me say something. We've been told, and we teach this in our church all the time, it takes 10 seconds to create a good impression or a bad impression. And so every one of those seconds is really important. There's an old saying, which I use all the time: God is in the details.
Yeah.
God is in the details. And so when it comes to me teaching my team, I'm just so impressed with people like Sam and Phil and others. They're so conscious of the small, intimate details that go to making up the entire service. But it's something that we have taught, that we've instructed, we've brought correction on, because if it hadn't been Sam that had stood up there and said, hey, we need to do that again, it would have been, if Phil hadn't been there, I would have looked at Sam and I would have made my comment known to him, and then he would have stopped it again.
Yeah.
So there's a reinforcing of culture all the time. One of the things that I've been talking about a lot during Culture Club is how I learned Thai culture. And being an Australian, moving into Thailand, one of the most prominent things is how to why. And, it's hilarious watching people come from Australia to Thailand and how they try to why as well. And I can see that it's ridiculous and they're doing it all wrong and stuff like that. And the Thai people just smile very indulgently. But they stopped smiling indulgently at me after a year. After a year, they thought to themselves, you've been here for a year. You should know how to do this by now. And so they would show me again. And, it works differently to whoever you're greeting or whining to. If you're whining to someone who's older than you, then it's slightly lower. If it's some younger person, then if it's a child, learning it and it being reinforced is really important. And it's the details that we work on. So thanks, Felipe, that was great. Keep going.
Awesome. Keep going. Yeah, so there's 2 more observations that I made that I really loved at Proclaimers. Like just being there was awesome already, it was my first international engagement, so that was like so cool. But the other thing that I really loved is the openness of the whole church, I think I was the first German guest speaker. Was I? I think so. Yeah. So as you already hear, like English is it's not my mother language, my mother tongue, so it's kind of still sometimes difficult to talk, and especially to preach in English for the first time, 4 different messages on a weekend. So that was intense, and obviously I always came back to the room, and I said like, oh man, that probably wasn't that good. But I still loved the amount of engagement. I never had the feeling that people were sitting in there kind of like, let's see what this German is bringing. So there was a leaning into the preaching. There was a leaning towards, the message, the word of God. And they didn't care too much about misspelling or, mispronunciation or maybe like a weird sentence structure or whatever. And that is awesome. Because I would say it's not natural, Normally, well, I know it from Germany, it is that people normally point out the mistakes, and I never had that feeling. Yeah.
Let me say something here. we have been using terminology like lean in and engage for at least 10 years now. And so we've been encouraging our folk that when someone gets up to speak, they want to be inspired and encouraged. And the way we get the most out of them is by engaging with what they're saying, by saying, yeah, that's great. And not just verbally, but, you know, leaning in physically as well and listening. Let me say, the people of our church, and I got to be, I was a bit surprised. It was the first time you'd ever come to our church. Our church absolutely loves you.
Come on.
Weeks afterwards, they kept talking about you. How good was Felipe? Wasn't Felipe great? We really enjoyed him. When's he coming back? And so, you know, people responded to you because of that transparent, authentic way in which you spoke. But we teach our church how to engage in that at that time and on that level. Again, it's something that we have to continually teach. We're now doing something online by saying, hey, use emojis, you know, do something on the chat line, you know, press the little heart button.
Yeah.
You know, I got a little bit carried away on Instagram Live the other day looking for the heart button and found the filters button. And so that was hilarious. It was quite hilarious. Thankfully, it was up here and not, you know, not in Norwich. But I looked really funny with ears and a funny little dog nose. But anyway, moving on. Thank you.
Come on.
Hand it over to you, Felipe. Oh, hang on. Sam wants to say something.
Yeah, just off the comment of engagement in the room, you know, Pastor Tom, you said, you know, it brings out the best in the speaker, which is so true, but it also helps new people to engage into whatever it is. It helps people around engage. You know, if there's someone sat in the auditorium a couple of seats away from you and they're leaning in and they're saying, yeah, that's so good. Oh, come on. Great word, Felipe. It says to you, oh, maybe this is something that I should be listening to as well. That's like this person over here seems to really be getting something out of this. Maybe I should lean in as well. And it creates an atmosphere of engagement. And when you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, more and more people doing that same thing, it creates that whole atmosphere of engagement, and the whole room is electric. And yeah, that's, as Pastor Tom said, that's something that we really strive from, and we talk about it in our you know, team leaders meetings and department leader meetings, everything, just communicating that culture again and again.
Yeah, that's so cool. Would you say, if I'm allowed to ask a question as well, would you say that in the UK this is a normal way of engaging, or was it something that you really had to train your people to do?
This is not normal in the UK.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Train. And here's the point about culture. I think culture can be cross-cultural. I think some of these principles that we talk about can be cross-cultural. You can teach a German audience how to respond like this as well as you can teach a French audience, as you can teach a Thai audience, you know, right across the world, you know, working with Hillsong churches as well. You know, you get into a Hillsong church and you see it's the same culture.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we loved about you was that you came in and you were just like part of the family immediately. And one thing is that people know that I guard my pulpit very carefully. You know, I'm very careful who I allow to speak from our pulpit, because I know that, you know, whoever is speaking has to reflect our values as well. And almost from the word go, from the moment you opened your mouth, it was like, oh gosh, we really love this guy. So it was something we've had to work really, really hard intentionally to teach. We've instructed, we've encouraged, we've inspired, we've even brought correction at times. But this is something that we've worked really, really hard on. Now, I notice it as well when people are leaning in. There can be a moment in your message when they're incredibly quiet, but it's like, it's quiet because they're listening.
Yeah.
They're listening like they've never listened before. And so, you know, again, it's up to the speaker to be able to work out, you know, is it going to be a, yeah, come on, preach it, good stuff? Or is it like they're on the edge of their seat? So go on.
Yeah, so cool. So yeah, and the last thing that I really observed and this is something that I really think that doesn't come natural in churches, is the amount of young power that you have been raising, Pastor Tom. Seriously, I know a lot of pastors in your age, and a lot of those pastors don't release young people into leadership. And this for me is like the most healthiest thing that you can publicly create in a church, to allow young people to really carry authority. And I mean, your whole team is so young and so gifted, but it takes a great pastor, a great senior pastor, to allow that and to make room and to so I don't know how to do that, but I observed that and I loved it, because as I said, I know a lot of churches where like the senior pastor says, like, I kind of bring young people in, but they're not allowed to really create and to shape culture and to really use authority and to really lead. But that is something that I observed, and I totally loved it. I totally loved it to see the young team. Like Sam, I mean, whew.
Say that again, Tom.
Sam, would you like to make some response here?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what Felipe just said. Tom, you're brilliant at doing this, empowering young leaders. And actually, it's, the amount of trust that he places on us and has done it for years has been incredible. The opportunities that we've been able to have and to step into. I think what Tom does so well is providing a safe space for which, these young leaders can step up and develop. There were times when we used to do something we called a revolution service. And it was kind of anything goes for the young guns. And, you guys plan the service, and whatever you think is going to work, however crazy it is, just go for it. And we'll be there as a sounding board and help you out. And it was these kind of things like, wow, we actually get the opportunity to lead worship and to speak into the life of the church, and we're only 18, 19 or whatever, and for us this is an incredible opportunity. But it wasn't like Tom just picked us up and was like, dropped us into this situation like, okay, off you go, this is all you, and I'll just watch and see how you go. It was a process. They were there, Pastor Tom, the other leaders a little bit older than us were there, giving us pointers, helping us, keeping us accountable as well. So that whole process, they were there teaching us and developing us and giving us a little bit more responsibility when we succeeded in what it was that we were giving us correction when we didn't do so well. But yeah.
When I first arrived in the UK, I noted some statistics that average sized churches was between 35 and 40 people. And the average age was approximately 65 to 75 in those churches. And I just quickly worked out those churches have got a 30-year future, until all of the members of those churches are dead. Now, the most terrific thing was that none of those churches were growing, those more traditional style churches. When I first arrived at Proclaimers, I noticed that there were very few young people. And when I got up to preach, all of the young people would go out of the auditorium and have their own service. And I thought, oh, that's horrible. I don't want that. I want those young people to hear me preach. I want those young people here when I'm speaking. So I put a stop to it. We lost a few families over it because the kids said they didn't want to be in the big church. So what we did was we started a Sunday night service, and we made it like it was going to be crazy, radical, wild, contemporary. Young people were going to be leading. I'd be there. I'd preach. There'd be a move of the Holy Spirit. We'd pray for people. I'd prophesy, and it would be one of those really Holy Ghost meetings. And that was the beginning of it. We live in a community where there's a university and a community college, as well as a college of the arts. And so we had a lot of students, probably 25,000 students live in Norwich. And so right from the beginning, I created words that would communicate our culture, a language that would communicate our culture. And the culture that we wanted was a church where university students could come in and find a place like home, where mums and dads like Denise and I would be there to help them. And, you know, over the last 15 years, the number of university students that have come in that me and Denise have been mum and dad to have been amazing. So we've got spiritual children all over the UK and some of them all over the world because of the way that we did that. Some that decided to stay became leaders. Again, we didn't leave these young people to their own devices. You know, there was a lot of instruction. There was a lot of, I remember doing classes on culture, doing classes on character, how to develop godly character. You know, and all of the kids, the young people were there and hearing my heart. But I wanted a young church. And I remember once when Pastor Brian Houston saw my ministry team, he looks at me and says, "Oh, they're all so young." I said, well, everybody's young compared to me and you, mate. But anyway, so,
Yeah, but
this youth emphasis in the life of our church. We have a lot of visitors that come through and say, "Wow, your church is so young. How did you attract those young people?"
yeah, but I would actually say that this is I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do well in terms of culture in a church, you know. But exactly this this outworking of, you know, like the senior leaders really creating space for young leaders. I would say this is like one of the highest forms of kingdom culture, because it takes, as I said, it takes a great leader like you, Pastor Tom, to really not only allow them, but, you know, like there's a lot of things probably, I guess, that you do as a church that you would say is not preferably your gusto, you know, but you still allow it, like fully allow, you know, to be like that. The church is this wild, awesome, attractive place, you know, and yeah, so I totally honor you for that, because that is amazing and I loved it, you know, and so I hope when I grow a bit older that I will be as wise as you, Pastor Tom.
You're a great leader already. And you know, there have been many occasions when I've seen the young people of our church do things, and I'm thinking to myself, not my cup of tea, but hey, they seem to be really enjoying it over there. So I just put up with it.
Come on.
Without complaint, simply because it's engaging with a generation of young people in the life of that church that maybe I can't. I've said to my team on regular occasions, just make sure I'm not trying to dress like an 18-year-old, if I'm not trying to talk like an 18-year-old. One of the girls in our church said to me, she says, as soon as you use a slang word from our generation, we know that it's time for us to stop using that word. Thank you very much. God bless you too. You know, I've determined that I'm going to use old-fashioned words like groovy. So I use groovy a lot when I speak as well. So just so that they all know that it's from my generation.
Come on.
Well, and here's the other thing too, when it comes to creating culture, I really love young people. I love their exuberance. I love their energy. You know, I love their openness. I love the fact that they're you know, within themselves, they're excited about being young. They're inspirational. They've got their life to live. You know, I love the way they communicate. I love the way they dress. I love their hairstyles. I mean, in years to come, our church will be known by the different hairstyles we've all had, including COVID-19 hairstyles. But, you know, there's something about having young people in the life of our church which has been fantastic. Well, this has gone longer than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Felipe, did you want to conclude with any comment or stuff like that about maybe how you're creating culture in your church?
Well, I mean, our journey is still pretty young. I mean, I've been pastoring almost 10 years now, this church. But when I entered in, like, church was in a very bad shape. So I'm still right in the middle of the journey. And as we actually were flying home from Norwich, Ferdy, who came with me, and we were discussing a lot about everything we saw, you know, all the details that we wrote down, and we were chatting about what did we learn for us as for Passion Church, what can we change, you know, where did you guys inspire us? And so we're coming home, basically this pandemic started, so we haven't had much chance of really creating new culture. Although obviously this new season brings new culture and new code with it, with itself. But Basically, it's just, I would say, to build culture is repetition. All the time, repetition, repetition, repetition. And I think one of the best things that I learned was one of the pastors told me, sometimes you don't even find words at the beginning when you want to create something new. And people sometimes expect like, well, explain. And sometimes as a pastor, you just have to say, just trust me, just go with me. But with the years, you develop wording and you develop a kind of explanation why, and you feel like, oh, it's actually working out. So that's my experience so far. Every time we kind of want to shift something, we realize it takes a bit of time where people just need to trust you, that the vision you have and the thing that you see in your eyes might be good and will be good. And then with the time, people say, now I get it. That's awesome.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I get accused of a lot is repeating myself. And truly, it's not the early onsets of dementia either, although a couple of my friends would beg to differ. But I keep saying to them, the reason I'm repeating myself all the time is because you're not listening and you're not taking my instruction. That's why I have to keep repeating myself. If you would do what I asked you to do, I'd stop repeating myself. And so repetition is truly one of the most important parts of developing culture in the life of a church, is repeating, giving examples, putting language to what ingredient you're talking about, whether for us it be the cause of Christ or generosity or servanthood, but using language, updating that language, updating experiences, celebrating people who do act according to the culture of the church. And so, for us, it's all about culture. As a senior pastor, I see myself as a cultural architect. And as I create and communicate, I'm expecting people like Sam and others to carry it and for them to communicate it as well. So this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much today.
Yeah, my honor.
It's been great. We really enjoyed you when you came to our church, and when all this COVID stuff is over, we'll have you back again.
Come on.
Again, our church just loved you. So we look forward to it. Sam, did you want to bring this to a conclusion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Again, Felipe, thank you for joining us today. It's been really, really good. Thank you everyone who's listened or watched to this episode. We really appreciate it. If you want to go back and check out any of the previous episodes, we definitely recommend you do so. There's so much content on there, but we're going to have more interviews just like this and have guests just as awesome as Felipe in future weeks. So do tune in to all the episodes that we're putting out. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple, iTunes, on YouTube, all that jazz. So yeah, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.